Welcome to Two Humans Talking, the podcast that discusses how to stay healthy in this crazy, fast paced world. I'm Tiffany Simms, your holistic wellness coach and your burnout recovery expert. And today I am bringing you Keri Cooper. And if you are a woman who feels like everyone else's calendar and schedule is running your life and you don't know how to get out of the overwhelm, today's chat is going to be for you. Keri and I are going to give you some really great not just practical tips, but real life applications of how we've overcome it ourselves so that you don't feel as crazy and alone in this. And you're like, what is wrong with me? You're going to see that it's totally normal, but there is a way out of it. And so, with that, Keri, I would love for you, first off, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Who are you? Where do you live? Like, what makes you you?
Who am I, right?
Who
Yeah.
are you?
I'm a holistic psychotherapist, and I will explain what that big term means in a second. But I've been a therapist for 20 years, and I am in northern New Jersey. I have 4 kids of my own, and I have a private practice. So I actually got into the field. I always knew I wanted to be a therapist, work with really kids and high schoolers, and that's where my career was. But of course, when you work with them, you work with the parents, especially the moms. And you
I'm a
know
high school field hockey coach. I feel that to my core.
oh yes, you do. And through working, I was always frustrated as a therapist that kids were getting better but never 100%, and I kept on feeling like we are missing something and we're not talking about it and everyone's overlooking it, and what is this missing puzzle piece? And it wasn't until I had my own kids, and one of my kids has, we later found out, a dairy insensitivity, which really impacted not only her little runny nose that every doctor was like, it's allergies, it's fine, but her behavior. Like she
Ooh.
just melted down constantly. And here I am as a mom thinking I just don't know what I'm doing. And oh my gosh, I'm a therapist too, and I still can't handle this. And what's wrong? And finally my friend was like, you need to pull dairy. And I was like, you're crazy. But I'm
That's nuts.
but I'm willing to try it. And we did. And for her, that was the key. And then I took a step back and I said, how many kids have I been treating who, because of food, their behavior is being impacted? And that was a
Yes.
much larger conversation than just, a dairy insensitivity. And I actually went back to school to become a certified health coach, even though I was already, a therapist, because I needed that food piece. And then recently I went back again to become a certified sleep coach because people, oh, especially women do not know how important sleep is
Well, we
and how
do. We
priority.
we we regurgitate it, we tell it to our
Yeah,
friends, but
yes.
I don't think that we truly, truly, truly understand how detrimental it is because we're like, we're surviving. I'm surviving. I'm good. I'm not drowning in this hole. I mean, I'm drowning, but like I'm still functioning. We're good,
Barely, but we're
but
still
it's not.
barely, not even. And it's not until you make the changes that you go, how did I survive in that state before?
Yeah, you're like, what the hell? And it's almost like, and the same thing happens when you realize that there's certain foods that don't work for you, not because they're good or bad, but you realize that like your body doesn't process them well. They like do weird things for you chemically, and now all of a sudden you're grumpy and bitchy for no reason. And then
Completely.
all of a sudden you feel better, and then you're like, how did I not know that I was so shitty? Because you change, you make these changes, you're feeling better, everything's fine, and you don't think twice about it, and then you go enjoy something that you used to eat all the time, and all of a sudden you're like, why don't I feel good? And then
Yeah.
you're like, I didn't know I felt shitty. How did I not know that I felt this way? But it's because that was your like your normal.
And so many people are going through life like that. They don't realize how bad they actually feel because they're just used to it.
Yeah, I
They're
was
just
one of
used
them.
to it. I
I
was too.
didn't know how shitty I felt until I felt better and then went back to old habits, and I was like, whoa.
I was the same exact way. I was a really, really extremely moody teenager, 20-something-year-old, just moody. And it wasn't until I changed how I was eating that I went, "Oh, I could actually, like, handle stress and have, like, a balanced emotional regulation." I had no idea that, and looking back now and knowing what I know, it
And
was
the balanced emotional regulation, you're like, what is that?
right? I was such a sugar addict, didn't even know I was addicted to sugar. But the whole day, my blood sugar is spiking and then dropping, spiking and then dropping. And I'm wondering why I'm moody as a teenager. And of course, my parents are like, you're such a nasty teenager. No, I am sugar dependent and my blood sugar is
I
everywhere.
I don't wanna go down this rabbit hole, but, like, I mean, it is what it is.
Are we
One of
jumping
the
down
things
it? Let's jump down it.
Yeah, one of the things that drives me, like, just completely baffles my mind is we as a society are always talking about how, like, the increase of ADHD and kids can't pay attention in their learning styles and their sitting skills and like all of these, not saying we shouldn't have accommodations, but there's like all this stuff happening in the classroom, right? And they have the attention span of a goldfish. Yet how do we reward children for good behavior in the classroom? Lollipops and miniature candy pieces. And I get that they're affordable and a lot of that comes out of teachers' pockets, but it's almost like being mad at a 3-year-old for being a 3-year-old and not acting like an adult. But it's like they don't have the skills to be an adult and to hold their composure yet. They're still learning all this stuff. So, like, if we know that they're struggling with sitting still, why are we giving them the thing that is disrupting their endocrine system that's making it harder for them to focus? I don't
Thank
get it.
you. Yes. Yes. So I primarily work with high school and college kids at this point in my career. And I do, some parent sessions and stuff like that. But I'm always like, we need to look at your child. And that's what I mean when I'm a holistic therapist. I look not just at the symptoms you're bringing me of ADHD, anxiety, depression. I want to know how much screen time is your child having? I want to know if you're having family dinners. I want to know if they're drinking water, what they're eating in the morning, what they're eating all day long. If they're outside playing, are they getting good exercise? Are they overscheduled? All of this feeds into their day-to-day behavior.
Yeah, and I want to pause on that for a second because I know I can hear her right now, our friend that's here with in our conversation with us, but like I don't want them to have food restrictions. I want it to be okay and I don't want them to feel restricted and rigid and like they're allowed to have fun and be kids.
Yeah.
That's not what Carrie's saying at all. When she's asking those questions, it's not because they're wrong or bad. It's because she's trying to collect all of these different data pieces to figure out what is not in the right place so we can tweak it to make everything else flow together. Because there's nothing wrong with screen time, there's nothing wrong with candy, but like
Oh,
what is not working for you or your kid right now that we can just tweak by 1 degree. You might not even notice it is such a small change, but it makes such a huge difference.
it comes down to balance. That's what life is about. You cannot go black and white. It can't be no screen time ever. That's literally impossible for these kids at this point. And then you're messing up their social lives as well once you hit a certain grade. And listen, I know all the negatives that come with screen time. It does need to be restricted. However, it also changes with age and all that. But it's that bigger picture of have your cake, have your donut, have your candy. But if you're at home eating healthy dinner meals with your family, a good breakfast, healthy snacks are in the house, then you can go right ahead and have that slice of pizza and that donut. And I tell, especially, the girls I work with, you should never feel guilt over food, ever,
No,
ever.
no. And I think that if we can teach our kids, well, first we have to learn it ourselves. When women come to me and say, like, my kids are struggling, do you work with children? I always say, are you open to working with me personally? Because, like, we have to start with you. You have to be the example without saying it, right? They have to just see it. It has to just be. You have to be that person and they follow. And if we can teach women, then we can teach our kids how to listen to their bodies because our bodies are so stinking smart, but we're constantly trying to override them. And so we don't know how to listen when it's telling us something is off, or we stuff down those red flags and say, like, oh, you're being dramatic. But it's like, can we teach ourselves and our kids to listen to our bodies so that we know when someone's disrespecting us and we handle it respectfully? When we know a food is or isn't working for us, so we can either keep eating it or start playing with different alternatives. And so like I it's something that as a society we're not very good at, which is that listening, that intuition part.
So true. And, you brought up something else that was really important in this conversation is, you talked about kids are modeling the behavior. So that's where, I'm in my office talking to kids about them being able to set up good boundaries and telling a friend, no, I can't talk to you for 3 hours on FaceTime about your boy problems because I have my own homework to do. But what they're seeing is their parents, more times, a female, just bend over backwards for everybody else but them. And that's what they're seeing and that's what they're learning.
Yeah.
So I always bring it back to the, especially the moms, and I say, what are you teaching your child to do? You're teaching them to put everybody else first but themselves.
Yeah, and it's not about like telling them and lecturing them into it. It's sharing why we do things a certain way. Like, oh, like, did you know? Like, I'm feeling being able to say, like, man, I'm feeling really crappy. Let me think about this earlier. And then like sharing with them that realization of like what could have triggered the crabbiness for you and go, do you have any recommendations for me that I could do differently next time? And bringing them into that conversation to get their brains engaged so that they can trust that their solutions actually have like validity and they get to be a scientist in their own life.
Yeah. And to share with your kids, like how you're putting yourself first. Like if I'm annoyed one day, I will grab my headphones, my phone, and I'm like, I'm going out for a run. See you later.
Mommy needs a timeout.
I need to do this for me. Goodbye. You know?
Mommy's feeling a little overwhelmed, a little overstimulated. I'm going to take a timeout.
Yeah.
I'll be back in like 20 minutes.
Mhm.
Do you need anything depending on the age? Do you need anything before I go?
You'll
I
all
love that.
survive it. Goodbye.
You're gonna survive. Goodbye. I I'm laughing in my head because we started this conversation. I'm sure the woman who's here with us right now who's like, I thought you talked about being overwhelmed. Like, Tiff, how did you go from like setting this up for overwhelm and how did you get back on food again? Like, how'd we get here? How'd we get here? And I think we as a society, I know I did for years, underestimate how much food plays a role in how we treat ourselves because how you feel in your body is how you experience the world.
So true. So true. When you are eating food that makes you feel good, that's giving you energy, that makes you just feel alive, your entire outlook on life is changing.
Yes.
When you are essentially poisoning yourself with some of the food that we have in this country, which is not allowed in other countries, by the way. When you're essentially poisoning yourself, you are so physically and mentally weighed down. You just feel like sluggish and like you can't accomplish, and then you're tired, and then you're cranky, and you can't handle stress. And then you're grabbing something, to try to make yourself feel better in that moment. And it works in that moment, but then the cycle just starts repeating itself. And you just feel like you can't get out of it. And
Yeah.
it feels like anything you want to change in your life is just so
So
hard.
hard,
It just feels so
unattainable.
overwhelming.
It feels like a chore.
Yeah.
Whereas I love that. And I can say these words all day long, Carrie, but the truth is that like if I go back to Tiffany before she experienced all these things and someone said to her like when you eat better, you feel better, and when you feel better, you take care of yourself better and you don't allow certain things in your life. I would have heard those words and been like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But so I want to respect the fact that there really is something between the words that you and I share and you and I having experienced it. We know what we're talking about. We know that feeling. And I want to respect the space that the woman listening to us right now, she may not have experienced that. So she may really not understand what it is that we're saying because she hasn't felt that yet. Do you have words really to like give to that beyond just like the quotable when you eat better, you feel better and people treat you better thing?
Yeah. So it's so overwhelming to make changes. I mean, it is so overwhelming and it is so hard. And what I tell people is, I'm going to have you start with one thing,
Mm,
just one. And what I always start with, I have an entire chapter of it in my book, is water. The only thing I want you to change is I want you to start drinking more water throughout the day. People do not realize how much better that can make them feel. And water It's not I'm not telling you to get on a bike and go exercise. I'm not telling you to all of a sudden start cooking differently. I'm just telling you to drink water. That's something that most people could be like, "Okay, I could attempt that. That sounds manageable. That sounds achievable."
Yeah.
When you start drinking more water and you start getting rid of the, 10 cups of coffee a day and the sodas and energy drinks, you will feel better. And what happens is when we take one positive step and we see it just a little bit of a success, it is so much easier to then take that second positive step and that third positive step. And then all of a sudden it's like you're just doing it.
It's like those small wins. It's like little check boxes like, "Oh, I drank some water today. Go me."
Go
And you
me.
get really good at that. And maybe today you sucked at it
Mhm.
because we all go through that season. I don't care how long you have been quote unquote healthy and on it. Like we all have days where like we're not great. And it's like, "Oh man, I feel it today." But you just start and you're like, "Man, you build belief in yourself that you can do the things you committed to."
Yeah. And that
And
you're
that
worth
really is the game.
it. Mhm.
Can you build belief in yourself to show up for the things that are important to you and that you say that you want? Because the more you can do that, even if it's so tiny and feels so insignificant, those things stack up. They stack up so big. And you were talking about like the water, and not that water is trendy, but it's kind of trendy. Drink more water. Here's a fancy water bottle. Here's a fancy $50 cup that's going to like change your life. Like, so water's kind of trendy. But what it's really doing for you is one, it almost creates separation for you in your life. Because one, when you're really hydrated, you pee a lot, you don't have time for gossip and nonsense. Like, you got to be efficient because you have so much time before you need to pee again. But it's also what it's doing is it's helping your body transport the nutrients that you gave it throughout your whole system, which is why it's making you feel better. It's getting the nutrients in the building blocks to the right parts, to the right companies, if you will, in the right little loading docks in your body for it to do something with all that great food that you've been feeding it.
Mhm. It
When
flushes
we're
everything out.
dehydrated,
It's so, so important.
yeah, and when you're dehydrated, it's like following someone going 5 miles an hour on the interstate versus the person who's going 80 and you are just rocking and rolling.
So it's funny when we talk about water. I was a kid who never drank water. I was a 20-year-old who never drank water. Like when I tell you never, I mean never. So I had drink water for 6 years as my New Year's resolution.
I love this.
6 years. And finally, I bought myself like just this not a $50 cup, like, a $10
It
water
could
cup
be, I won't judge.
that had a straw. And for some reason, having a straw just made me drink the water all of a sudden.
It's so funny you say that because I comment a lot on water bottles and jugs based off of like the draw because there are some straws. I don't know how they create them and what voodoo magic, but sipping out of them is just so enjoyable and easy. And then there's other ones where it's like a chore. It's a lot of work to drink out of the cup. And
Yes.
it's not fun, but like and I appreciate you for saying that because I can't tell you how many times where I'm like, Tiffany, you're nuts. This is a crazy thing to think
It
about, but it makes a difference. And there is, and then you know what? If buying a new water bottle every 3 months like gets you excited to drink water, I have throw no shade at you because sometimes, like I'm a 39-year-old woman. I give myself stickers throughout the day for a job well done. I am sticker motivated still at 39. So like whatever you got to do to like pump yourself up, you go do that.
yes. Yeah. So it's like it's that simple. It's just, you have to keep trying. Just every day. It's like a new day. Like, let's go. Let's drink my water. But water is like one of those things where it's just the easiest step to take.
Yes. One of the easiest and most insignificant feeling steps that you will take, but it will change your life if you can do it consistently.
Mhm. And what's interesting is once you do it consistently, if you go a day where like you're not that great at your water consumption, you feel it, you know it, and you're like, oh man.
Yes, it like re-imprints the decision that you made into your DNA of why you are that person who does that thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes sometimes your body has to be incorporated into the changes and the decisions. Like I don't buy into the like here's the morning routine you need to do and these are the foods you must eat and exclude these like a person has to internalize why things work or don't work for them. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. You're just militantly following someone else's rules. And so I'm
Yeah,
real big on people like really feeling and making those choices of what actually is working best for them.
absolutely. It's got to feel good to you, and that's the same thing with like exercise. If you hate Pilates, don't force yourself to do Pilates.
You don't need to.
You don't need to. Find what you like. Like, it's
Yes.
all about listening to your body. We're all different. Our bodies
We have
respond
different
differently.
preferences. We enjoy conversations differently. We have different motivators. Our bodies digest different things differently. Like we have different interests and hobbies. Like of course you're not going to like the same foods or the same activities or have the same quote unquote boundaries as someone else
Right.
because you're different people and your values are different. They can be similar, but at the end of the day, your values are uniquely yours and how you interact with the world is going to be uniquely yours. And so you have to figure out what really works for you and what's not. And, Carrie and I started this with like, if you're feeling overwhelmed and you feel like everyone's running you over and there's no time for you, it's because somewhere in your universe, one of your islands is out of harmony. Like, so I always talk about like your health, your relationships, and the way you earn money, and we treat them as separate. Like I got to focus on my family and my in right now, and nothing else is important. And then that gets good, and everything else falls to shit. And then you're like, okay, my family's good. I got to go back to my job before I get fired real quick. And then it's like, oh my God, I've gained 30 pounds. My family's falling apart. Like, where do I go? And you got to go back to saying, like, what's out of harmony and what do I need to take control of or and start doing differently. We have to take responsibility for ourselves, and I know that's unsexy, but like I love you guys enough to say like you have to take responsibility in a way that feels authentic and true to yourself.
Yes, you have to really listen to you, not what you think is expected of you. What do you actually want to do? What actually makes you happy?
Yes.
When my kids were young, I was very involved with the school, right? Very involved
Were
on the
you one of those parents? No, I'm kidding.
I definitely was. And let me tell you something, I had no patience. I was like overrun with just doing other things. I wasn't able to really spend the time I want to spend with my kids because I was doing things that I thought I was supposed to be doing for them. And finally I came to my senses at one point and I was like, I'm done. And I remember someone coming up to me being like, so we're having a fundraiser. Do you think you could run it? And I looked at her and I said, no.
No, I
And I
can't.
offered no other, like, oh, because of this or because of that. I just went, no. And she just looked at me and I said, no, thank you.
Not
And just
this
walked
time.
away. Mhm. And, now I only do the things that I really want to do that make me feel good. And everything else, I'm just a no to. And, I wrote somewhere once, I said, no is a complete sentence. I don't
It
need
is.
to justify my no. I don't need you to understand my no. If I'm saying no, it's just a no.
And I want to add to that. Your no doesn't have to be shitty.
No.
Can have no emotional charge to it. And I share that because I know in the beginning of practicing it, like the walls are up, you're anticipating their reaction, and so you're trying to play defense. But if you can just confidently and calmly and with the most humanity that you have, be like, no, thank you, or no, and just keep on going about your day, like you'll feel so much better about it. I think a lot of times it's the internal stories that we've worked up in our head of when I say no or like of what the other person is going to feel or do or react. And it's not our job. The biggest lesson I had to learn, Carrie, was it's not my responsibility to carry someone else's suitcase and take it home and unpack it and put it away.
This brings up such a good point. So you are not responsible for somebody else's feelings. And that is something where we have really done a disservice to our children, especially by teaching them that they are. They are not. That is an impossible task. That does not mean our children should not be good humans. It does not mean we shouldn't
Thank
be
you
good
for
humans.
saying that
But
part. I
I
think
am
people
not
forget the second part
responsible.
of the sentence.
I am not responsible for somehow somebody reacts. And I say to kids all the time, this is the example I give, right? And by the way, not being responsible for somebody else's feelings, again, an entire chapter in my book because it's so important. But I give kids this example all the time. If I'm driving in my car and I cut somebody off by accident, right? Didn't mean to, did it by accident. They have a choice. They can either be like, whatever, and continue on their way, or they could be like, how dare she? And blare on the horn and give me the finger. I did the same thing. I did the same exact thing, two different people. It is about their choice on how they want to respond to that.
Yes. And then when you take responsibility for yourself in that, and you like, that's where it all goes different. That's like the pivotal turning point because all of a sudden your nervous system stays regulated. You can't control them, but you don't have to be an asshole about it in return
Exactly.
because someone's an asshole to you.
Exactly. I control my reactions. And
Yeah.
just like I'm telling people you don't control other people's reactions, those people don't control your reactions. You
Yes.
can't fly off the handle and say, well, they made me. No, they didn't. You
Yes.
chose.
Yes, 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 yes. And it's such a hard concept because it's like, I have to defend myself. No, you don't.
No,
What
because
people,
they're not
other
doing
people's
it anyway.
opinions of you? Right. Do you really care if that's how they're reacting? Are they really a quality person you want to be with? You can give people grace and forgiveness and understand that people have bad days and just smile and move about your business.
And when
Like,
you know it's not about you, it's easier to do that. When you know, like, you're not responsible for their feelings, if they fly off the handle, you know, like, it's not because of me.
yeah. And
And
it
you're
takes
supposed to not
practice.
react.
It takes practice
Mhm.
over and over again because you're now reconditioning a whole lifetime of coping mechanisms and reaction mechanisms that your body runs on autopilot. So it takes practice and conscious, like, I don't like the way I handled that. That's not kind of the person I want to be. Let me try it again next time.
Yeah.
Like over and over again. And
Mhm.
if you're triggered by someone who's really calm in conflict, maybe that's something that you're like, I wonder how they do that, where you could learn something from them. I think that's also something else that we're don't do well as a society. We seek asking help and seeking guidance or asking someone how they do something that we admire about them as a sign of weakness and like we suck and we're a failure. But if you can think of it like something that helped me was when I think about it as a skill that someone else has, it doesn't mean I suck. It just means I don't have that skill and they're good at it. Why not ask? Why not accept the help or the guidance or maybe the unsolicited feedback as like maybe it had nothing to do with me sucking as much as it was that person had a really hard time with this or learned something and wanted to share it with me. And whether I take it with me or not, who cares? But like, why do we have that resistance to support and feedback and input from other people?
Yeah, because, we have in our mind that we're just supposed to know it and do it. And that's impossible. Like there's so many resources. And the other thing is, people really like to be able to help others. Like they do.
We just talked about people pleasing. That's how we started. Like, are you overwhelmed? Can you
Right.
fast? No, you like helping other people too.
Right. And when it's done in a healthy way, it's good for both parties. When somebody asks me advice about like setting up a private practice, I am more than willing to sit down with somebody and give them that advice because I truly feel like I'm giving back
Yes.
and they're getting something out of it. And that's
Yes.
wonderful and great.
Because as humans deep down inside, if we can prevent someone else suffering as long as we did, if we can shorten that runway for them to get to the result, like why wouldn't we want to share what we learned and that
Mhm.
we would do differently next time or that we wish we knew the first time? Like why wouldn't we? But yet we get so defensive and butthurt when someone, especially when older generations offer younger generations advice, a lesson, we get so defensive about like, you don't know what you're talking about. I didn't ask for that. And it's just like, just take it as the gift that it is. You would never unwrap something, or at least I hope you wouldn't. If you would unwrap something and behave in an unkind manner to someone, you should just exit this podcast now. You don't belong here. Um, but like you would never unwrap a gift and be like, why the hell did you give me this? You would just say thank you.
And then choose to use it or not down the road.
Right. And then you either use it or you put it in the donate pile. Like you just say thank you.
Or you choose not to use it, but who knows, 6 months down the road, you might say, "You know what? That gift's looking pretty good right now at this time in my life."
Yes. Oh my God, yes. Do you know how many times there are gifts that are given? And I'm not talking about physical gifts. It's like those lessons gifts that made no sense in the moment that I'm like, I don't even think so. But like 3 months from now, when everything else falls in place, all of a sudden that message hits a little different and you're like, that's what they meant by that. I just didn't have all the pieces to understand it. Oh, thank God I have this now because now I just like jumped 5 steps ahead.
Completely. Yes.
Oh, so good. Like, Carrie, I guarantee that no one expected our conversation to go this way when we talked about like overwhelm and boundaries and like how to just step into your own power. And looking backwards, because we can connect the dots when we look back, this conversation served in levels that I didn't know were like I had no idea this is where we were going and that's how we were going to serve today and how the message was to come out. Like this was gold. And and so you're listening to us, you're sitting there, one, subscribe because you don't want to miss conversations like this. This is the real life stuff of how I talk with my friends and what's happening behind the scenes. So like be here, subscribe to Two Humans Talking. And then if this whole time you're like, if you were in your head thinking, I don't understand what this has to do with the topic today. Now it's time to go re-listen to today's episode and today's conversation with that new lens and being open to it and see where you end up at the end of this conversation. Because I promise today's conversation is so much gold and literally just changed your life if you don't know it yet. So, Keri, what's on your heart right as we're wrapping up? Like, what's on your heart? Is there a message or maybe a life motto that you have that you want to share with the woman here with us today as we get ready to wrap up?
I really wish that I had this information sooner. I
Mm,
really do. And I see it throughout, my adult lifespan when I have 4 children, and how I kind of parented my first 2 is different than how I parented my last 2. And it's because I didn't set up boundaries. I wasn't taking care of myself. And I just wish that people heard this information as soon as humanly possible, because it really does change your life and it changes your joy and your happiness. And this life is short and
yes.
we got to be in it, and we should be able to be joyful in it. So that's kind of like what's on my heart right now, like being able to be joyful in it.
I'm writing that part down. Just be in it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I needed to hear that today, I think. Like, just be in it.
I needed to hear that too today.
I love it. You mentioned you have a book. I
Yeah.
guarantee you said that there was like a whole chapter that someone needed to read. Tell me about the book. How do I get it?
Yeah, so I have 2 books on Amazon. One is Mental Health Uncensored: 10 Foundations Every Parent Needs to Know, but it's really for any adult, or human being, because there's a whole chapter on water. It's all about the physical foundations, the first half, and then the mental foundations, the second half, that really transform your life. And yeah, there's a whole chapter on you're not responsible for somebody else's feelings.
Oh,
There's a whole chapter on boundaries
I
and how
love
to
it.
set them up. And, I don't just bring in the research behind it. I also bring in, and now how do you do this? Now, how do you make this change
So good.
forward? So it was funny, the parents were all reading this book and telling me how much they loved it. And they're, trying to get their kids now hooked into it. But parents are just talking and kids aren't always listening. So I actually then made a workbook for teens, which goes off of all of these foundations. And it's their responsibility to take this workbook, and they start writing, how much water am I drinking today and how is it making me feel? And, what are my goals for the future?
That's
And how are
brilliant.
my friendships going? And what boundaries do I need to put into place? And it's just eye opening for these kids. So that one's Mental Health Uncensored: 10 Foundations Every Teen Needs to Know. And it's a workbook.
That is so good. So, if you've been listening today and you're like, all right, Carrie and Tiff, I hear what you're saying, but I'm just not clicking. I don't even know where to start to this transition. Go grab the book. Um, how do they grab it, by the way?
Amazon. It's on Amazon.
Amazon. Perfect. So go grab it off of Amazon, connect with Carrie. She is here to serve, and I hope that today's message was just what you needed. And if you heard today and you're like, my girlfriend really needed to hear this, and there was someone you thought of today, I really encourage you to be a good friend. Hit that share button and share it with her and let her know why you thought of her so that she knows why she needs to listen, take time to listen to today's episode. Keri, thank you so much for being here. With that, that was Two Humans Talking. I will see you guys next time. Bye.